Adrian Marlowe sat alone at the cool marble countertop of his kitchen in Ravenwood, the early morning light slanting through the windows and dust motes dancing in its glow. He tapped a silver-framed smartphone with slow deliberation, his fingers lingering over the edge of the screen as if reluctant to finish what he'd already begun. He was 46 years old, a veteran IT systems consultant who had built a reputation on forensic precision, catching minute data inconsistencies that most people would never notice. Today, it was his own life that felt unaccountably off-kilter. He watched Serena's face fill the display, smooth skin glowing under the soft lighting of some unknown luxury suite. She was smiling, a triumphant, almost brazen smile that shone with a confidence he hadn't seen in years. Around her wrist, an exquisite diamond bracelet glittered like a line of tiny stars. He recognized the brand from his mother's jewelry collection back in Ravenwood, except this specific design would have cost far more than she could have ever mentioned. Serena had always been cagey about money, downplaying expenses as necessary treats, but never like this. With a small tilt of the camera, she revealed the rest of the scene. Soaring ceilings crowned with ornate moldings, a sweeping panorama of lights from a cityscape he'd never heard of. It certainly wasn't the modest Portland apartment she'd told him she was visiting with her sister, a pale blue rental with thrifted furniture and threadbare rugs. "Don't worry," she said, her champagne flute tilting so the pale gold liquid swirled toward the rim, droplets catching the light like fleeting promises. "You'll land on your feet." The words hung in the air, hollow yet loaded with meaning. "Land on my feet. You will survive. You will be fine." He had heard that tone before, in boardrooms, on service calls, even in mid-flight when turbulence rattled the cabin, but never directed at him by the person he loved most. He set the phone down gently, as though afraid to shatter its glass face, and sighed. The kitchen around him felt suddenly foreign. The sleek, white shaker cabinets gleamed under recessed lights, a renovation Serena had passionately championed 2 years ago, though she'd rarely set foot near the stove. The island itself, with its quartz countertop and waterfall edge, remained a testament to her exacting taste. Yet he had cooked breakfast there only once in as many months. Above the counter, a grid of framed photographs portrayed happier days. Sunlit weekends on the Oregon coast, smiles stretched wide under pines, snapshots of laughter that now seemed like echoes from someone else's life. He remembered the spontaneity she once brought to those trips, how she'd insisted on detours down forest roads, the way she'd dart her camera at him while he scowled at muddy trails. Back then, her restlessness had felt like vitality, a spark to his steady flame. Today, each photo felt like evidence of a life that had quietly slipped through his fingers. He rubbed his temples, feeling a dull ache behind his eyes. The shock he'd anticipated didn't come. Instead, there was a cold confirmation of what he'd suspected for months. As an IT consultant, he'd detected minute deviations in data streams, a misplaced semicolon causing chaos, a single altered digit triggering alarm bells. Emotionally, he'd noticed small anomalies at home, a text notification left on screen too long before dismissal, a credit card statement flagged somewhere unfamiliar, a sudden aura of secrecy at dinner. He'd chalked it up to her introverted retreats, a need for occasional privacy. Now, everything snapped into clarity. A soft beep from the phone drew his attention back to the screen, where Serena's laughter rippled like a recording on loop. The lavish suite around her seemed almost gaudy, velvet drapes pooling at marble floors, gilded accents framing a panoramic view of rooftops that glinted under street lamps. He recalled her telling him, 6 months ago, that her sister's new job with that small tech startup had paid for her tiny Portland flat, but he'd never seen a place like this. This was a suite meant for dignitaries, celebrities, not someone claiming to be on a casual weekend getaway. He picked up the phone again and watched until the last frame washed to black. Her teeth, perfect and white, teeth he once kissed, now looked like stepping stones on a path that led straight away from him. He closed the video and exhaled, a slow release that rattled his chest. Then, with a calm born of meticulous planning, he opened the bottom drawer of his home office desk. Inside sat a manila folder, its edges crisp from disuse. He pulled it out carefully and spread its contents across the desk. Bank statements meticulously annotated, investment summaries stamped with dates and notes, legal documents bearing his signature alongside Serena's, paperwork she'd signed without a second glance. He'd been preparing for this exact moment for months. ever since the first unexplained withdrawal from their joint checking account. She'd brushed it off as online shopping. He'd let it pass. But the pattern grew. Restaurant charges in unfamiliar neighborhoods, hotel stays logged under aliases, gift shop purchases far beyond reasonable limits. Each anomaly had set off flags in his mind. He recalled the night he discovered her texting someone else, the way her smile flicked differently when she read those messages. She never looked at him like that anymore. He had felt a pinprick of dread then, and in that instant, decided to protect himself. On paper, their retirement savings were a single account held jointly. In reality, he'd moved 70% of the assets into LLC-controlled funds tied to his consulting business, accounts she'd unwittingly approved in trust. She'd been bored by numbers, he'd been alive in spreadsheets. Serena had always joked that he overplanned everything, that he treated romance like a Gantt chart. But her spontaneity had been the perfect complement to his structure. Weekend trips she organized sparked new business connections that landed him bigger contracts. Her social circle welcomed him into community circles he'd never have visited alone. They balanced each other. "You plan, I live," she'd said on their honeymoon. For years it had been true, but the balance tipped quietly and he hadn't realized how far, until now. He leaned back in his ergonomic chair and steepled his fingers, mind racing through options. The fraud department at their bank would respond. He'd made that call shortly after first noticing the suspicious charges 8 months ago, only to discover that dual authorization was required for withdrawals over $10,000. A protection he'd quietly strengthened. Now, they would freeze the account. They would investigate. And he would file his divorce papers at dawn, using the partially completed forms waiting in his desk. As the phone lay face down on the counter, he felt an unexpected lightness, an emotional shedding that surprised him. The kitchen, the photographs, the opulent renovation all represented a life he thought he'd built together, but which had been unraveling without his knowledge. Tonight, he truly saw it for the first time. How little of his own essence remained in those rooms. The soft hum of the refrigerator, the clinical precision of the white tile backsplash, the pallid echo of distant city noise beyond the windows. They belonged to a marriage that had already ended in spirit. He stood and walked through the house, pausing in rooms Serena had once chosen furnishings for. He noted how she never used the stovetop, preferring expensive dining out, how the art on the walls reflected her restless pursuit of status rather than any shared memory. He tread lightly up the staircase, passing the guest room she'd begun sleeping in last month. He had assumed exhaustion from her new work retreats. Now he saw it as a self-imposed exile. When he reached the master bedroom, he stood before the closet, eyes scanning empty hangers where her finest clothes once hung. He recalled the first time he'd bought her a dress, a silk number in deep emerald, and how delighted she'd been. Now, the absence of those pieces felt like markers of her gradual departure. A faint scent of her perfume still lingered on a pillow, mingled with the crisp coolness of freshly laundered sheets he'd changed without thought. He closed the closet door quietly, as if in respect for the void. Back at his desk, he sat once more and tapped out a brief email to the fraud investigator. "My wife has attempted an unauthorized liquidation of our joint account. I did not consent. Please proceed with the freeze and investigation." He pressed send, and with it triggered the next stage of a plan he never hoped to enact. The soft whoosh of the email notification echoed in the silence. Adrian rose again, smoothing his shirt as though preparing for a court appearance. He felt no rancor, only clarity. He had been outmaneuvered in the one arena he thought they shared, their future together. But he still held the documents, the evidence, and the cold certainty of his own foresight. Tomorrow, at first light, he would forward divorce papers to his attorney. He would call Jack, the forensic accountant he trusted, and instruct him to compile every transaction, every irregular withdrawal, into a dossier for the courthouse. Retrieving his phone, he scrolled through a text from Serena. "Did you get my message?" Simple words, desperate at midnight. He didn't respond. Instead, he placed the phone gently atop the evidence folder and turned off the lamp. The halo of the street lamp outside cast long shadows across the hardwood floors. As he crossed the threshold to the hallway, he felt less like a man betrayed and more like one liberated from illusion. He paused, listening to the quiet settling in each room around him. For nearly 18 years, he had built a life, brick by brick, with spreadsheets, while she had quietly dismantled it on camera. Yet here in the hush of Ravenwood night, Adrian Marlowe felt profoundly awake for the first time in years. He inhaled deeply, ready to step into whatever came next. Adrian barely registered the sound of Serena's crashing phone against the wall. Her fury blossomed in that instant, eyes flashing like shards of broken glass. Yet he remained impassive, as though witnessing someone else's meltdown. When she stormed out of the house an hour later, dragging accusations and slamming threats in her wake, Adrian did not follow. Instead, he paused at the threshold of the guest bedroom, inhaling the crisp linen sheets she had abandoned. He closed the door quietly behind him, as though sealing away the last vestiges of a life he once believed was shared. Over the following fortnight, their home became a silent battleground. Adrian changed the locks on the front door the afternoon Serena left, and within minutes had installed a new security system in the foyer, complete with biometric access controls. Every corner of the house felt different now. The kitchen, once hers to mold with artful renovations, seemed coldly efficient under the glow of recessed lighting. The living room, where framed photos once chronicled laughter, now felt like a gallery of memories he no longer owned. But more remarkable was Serena's response. At first, she hurled threats through terse texts and voicemail messages, accusing him of betrayal, theft, and malice. When words failed, she resorted to legal intimidation. Letters from her high-powered attorney demanding full disclosure of all assets and asserting that Adrian had knowingly concealed marital property. Those letters Adrian forwarded, unread, to his own counsel, Samuel Green, trusting Samuel's measured replies to do their work. Meanwhile, Jack the forensic accountant had unearthed the full scope of Serena's betrayal. He invited Adrian to his sleek downtown office above the glass and steel towers of Ravenwood's financial district. Jack's steel gay tie matched the polished conference table where he spread out folders of bank statements, credit card receipts, and transaction logs. Small withdrawals at first, Jack explained, tapping a line on a spreadsheet, just under the bank's notification threshold. $9,899, over and over, between boutiques, spas, and fine dining establishments. Adrian's jaw tightened as Jack pointed to highlighted entries. Then larger ones, 12, 15,000 when you weren't around. Total diverted, $87,268. Adrian nodded, his voice calm. You also mentioned a separate account? Jack produced a ledger. 20,000 went directly into this account, belongs to an Oliver Whitaker. Age 41, regional manager at Voxton Audio. Pattern is clear. He's been targeting sales representatives, arranged transfers, then vanished before any suspicion could stick. Something cold crystallized in Adrian's chest. So it wasn't just a fling, he murmured. It was a calculated scheme. Jack nodded. Precisely. The money flow began 3 months after Whitaker moved into that role. Your wife's territory expanded around the same time. He likely scoped her out as a financial mark, using her access to marital accounts. Adrian drummed his fingers on the table. Does she know? Was she complicit? Difficult to say, Jack admitted. She may have been duped, believing it was part of some romantic adventure, or she may have colluded. But the forged paperwork for the retirement liquidation is professionally done. Someone coached her through it. Adrian exhaled. Holiday weekend timing. Exactly. Friday afternoon when staffing is low. Banks close Saturday and Monday. Jack closed his notebook with a muted click. You have leverage, evidence for civil and criminal proceedings. Armed with Jack's dossier, Adrian met Samuel the next morning in his law office overlooking Ravenwood's riverfront promenade. Sunlight glinted off the water below, but neither man paid it heed as they reviewed the evidence. Samuel leaned back in his leather chair, weighing the options. 3 paths. Proceed with divorce to secure asset division. File criminal charges against Serena and Whitaker for fraud and conspiracy. Or use this as leverage during settlement negotiations to recover misappropriated funds. Adrian paused, considering. And what about the other victims? Samuel raised an eyebrow. You're concerned about them? Adrian nodded slowly. If Whitaker's pattern is repetitive, he'll target more women. We could join their cases. Coordinate evidence, strengthen our position. A slow smile crossed Samuel's face. Resourceful, I like it. We contact the attorneys representing his previous partners, propose a unified approach that amplifies the pressure. Decision made, they moved quickly. Within days, 2 of Whitaker's former paramours agreed to share their experiences and documentation. Their combined affidavits painted a portrait. Whitaker met wealthy women through business functions, ingratiated himself, and siphoned funds before disappearing. Simultaneously, Adrian filed an anonymous tip to Voxton Audio's compliance department, detailing possible conflicts of interest with their regional manager. He provided redacted copies of bank transfers, prompting an internal review. At the bank, he personally delivered Jack's full report to the fraud investigation team, who escalated the probe to include Whitaker as a suspect. Throughout this period, Adrian maintained strategic silence towards Serena. He monitored every incoming text, threats, pleas, confessions, and forwarded each one to Samuel's secure email. He tightened security on all personal and financial accounts, changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and moved essential documents into a locked safe in his study. 7 days after his meeting with Samuel, his phone buzzed. Serena's tone had shifted. "Adrian, we need to talk. I think I've made a terrible mistake. There's more you should know about Oliver." He read the message once, then forwarded it without a word. 2 days later, he left his office building and found Serena waiting by the parking garage. Gone was the sleek confidence from her video. She looked pale, unsettled, as if dragged face first through a nightmare. "He's not who I thought," she blurted as he approached. "Oliver, he's lied about everything." Adrian kept walking toward his car. "That rumor's been circulating." She quickened her pace, voice trembling. "I just heard from his ex. He stopped, turning gradually. I know. So do the bank and our lawyer." Her eyes widened. "You knew?" "I had a forensic accountant trace every dollar you transferred." He folded his arms. "All 87,000. She seemed to falter. "I didn't know the extent." "You knew enough to try and wipe out our retirement." He glanced at his watch. "Goodbye, Serena." He slipped into his car and drove away, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows on Ravenwood's streets. The hearing was scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. on a crisp Tuesday in early November. Adrian arrived at the county courthouse wearing a dark suit, his tie neatly knotted and a dossier under his arm. He paused at the steps, inhaling the scent of fallen leaves drifting through the marble columns. Inside, the corridors echoed with murmurs of other civil and criminal matters, but Adrian's focus narrowed to one room. Courtroom 4B. He took a seat at the plaintiff's table while Samuel positioned their documents on a separate lectern. Across the aisle, Serena and Oliver sat side by side. Serena's posture was rigid, shoulders hunched, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles whitened. Oliver scowled, checking his phone as if bored by the proceedings. The bailiff rapped his gavel. "All rise." Judge Marjorie Langford, silver hair pinned in a tight bun and spectacles perched low, entered with deliberate grace. She settled behind the bench, ramrod straight, then glanced down at prepared notes. "Be seated." The courtroom hushed. "Mr. Marlowe," Judge Langford began, voice measured, "you have submitted evidence of financial misconduct, including forged signatures and diversion of marital assets to a third party. Is that correct?" Samuel stood confidently. "Yes, Your Honor. We have documented systematic fraud, both civil and criminal in nature, involving forged withdrawal authorizations and the transfer of significant funds to Mr. Whitaker." He handed the judge a USB drive and a set of tabbed binders. Judge Langford examined the materials. "Ms. Marlowe, Mr. Whitaker, how do you respond?" Serena's lawyer, a lean man in charcoal gray, rose first. He cleared his throat. "Your Honor, Miss Marlowe contends she was unaware of Mr. Whitaker's actions. Any forged documents were procured under false pretenses. She is a victim, as unwitting as the plaintiff." Oliver's attorney interjected, "Furthermore, there is no evidence Mr. Whitaker personally executed any forgeries. The criminal investigation is ongoing and no charges have been filed." Adrian felt a flicker of irritation. He had prepared for these defenses. When Samuel rose, the lawyer for Serena hissed under his breath. "Your Honor, if I may," Samuel began, voice crystal clear. "The evidence shows Ms. Marlowe authorized every account setup and withdrawal without reservation. She signed over irrevocable power of attorney to Mr. Whitaker's nominee accounts, all under her name. The timing and sophistication of the forgeries indicate professional involvement. Likely, Mr. Whitaker himself coordinating the scheme." He clicked a remote and a projection lit the wall beside the bench. Side-by-side images of Serena's signature on legitimate marital documents and the forged version on the retirement withdrawal. Serena swallowed hard, eyes flickering between the signatures. "Note the pencil strokes," Samuel continued. "The genuine curves are smooth and practiced. The forged version exhibits tremors consistent with someone copying under duress or through coaching." He advanced to the next slide. A timeline graph overlaying her bank login timestamps with Whitaker's IP address logs. The plaintiff's accounts were accessed repeatedly from Mr. Whitaker's home network, Samuel said. These are irrefutable digital fingerprints. Judge Langford leaned forward, steepling her hands. Mr. Whitaker, you may respond to these allegations? Oliver frowned, shifting in his seat. His voice came out flat. I was never presented with evidence until now. We deny any wrongdoing. There has been no formal criminal accusation against me. Samuel raised an eyebrow. Your Honor, real-time banking logs, cell tower pings, and IP records are on file with the fraud department. The multi-state investigation is well underway. Judge Langford tapped her notepad. The court will take judicial notice of the ongoing investigation as long as it remains confidential. Ms. Marlowe, she said, addressing Serena, what is your testimony regarding your knowledge of Mr. Whitaker's intent? Serena hesitated, shoulders drooping. I trusted him. I thought he was a friend, helping me navigate the paperwork. Samuel pressed gently. Did you read the documents you signed? She looked down. I saw them, but I was so overwhelmed. Adrian's heart sank for a moment, not out of pity for her, but at the realization of how thoroughly she had been ensnared. Yet he felt no sympathy for the cold betrayal that preceded her confusion now. Judge Langford consulted her notes. Given the evidence of orchestrated fraud, forged authorizations, and interstate transfers, this court finds substantial probable cause. We will bifurcate the proceedings. The civil divorce and asset division case will proceed separately. Simultaneously, I am referring the criminal matter to the district attorney's office for indictment review. She paused, looking at both defendants. You will both appear next month for a status conference. Miss Marlowe? Mr. Whitaker? You are admonished not to leave the jurisdiction. The gavel fell. As the courtroom emptied, Serena turned toward Adrian, eyes brimming with tears. He met her gaze for a single heartbeat. No anger, no triumph, only the clear knowledge that the facade between them had irrevocably collapsed. Without a word, he gathered his briefcase and left, the late morning light of Ravenwood filtering through the courthouse windows like a promise of new beginnings. Courtroom fell silent once more as Judge Langford reviewed the final exhibits. Adrian Marlowe sat with his attorney, Samuel Green, at the plaintiff's table. The hum of the air conditioning the only sound to fill the hush. Across the aisle, Serena Marlowe and Oliver Whitaker exchanged anxious glances. Adrian's gaze rested firmly on the judge, though his thoughts drifted to the journey that had led here. When the judge spoke, her voice carried the weight of finality. Mr. Marlowe, she addressed Adrian, the evidence submitted today, signatures compared side by side, transaction logs, video admissions, and witness statements, has established a clear pattern of financial exploitation directed by Mr. Whitaker and facilitated, knowingly or unwittingly, by Mrs. Marlowe. I will now deliver the court's orders. Adrian's pulse slowed. He braced himself for closure. First, Judge Langford declared, I hereby freeze all disputed assets pending final resolution in both the civil divorce and any subsequent criminal proceedings. Any attempt to conceal or transfer these funds further will be met with contempt of court charges. At that, Serena's lawyer inhaled sharply, and Oliver fidgeted, checking his phone. Adrian allowed himself a small nod of satisfaction. This safeguard ensured that the life savings neither predator nor accomplice could slip away. Second, the judge continued, I am formally referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal indictment of Mr. Whitaker on charges of fraud, forgery, and financial exploitation. While Mrs. Marlowe's culpability remains under separate review, her cooperation thus far warrants consideration for reduced charge. Serena made a soft sound, half gasp, half sob, as Samuel placed a comforting hand on Adrian's shoulder. His attorney shot Serena's counsel a steely look, but said nothing. Agreements in chamber beforehand would govern any plea negotiations. Finally, Judge Langford added, I remind all parties that this court expects full compliance with its orders. Mrs. Marlowe and Mr. Whitaker will appear for a status hearing in 30 days. Mr. Marlowe, congratulations on your exemplary presentation of evidence. The court acknowledges the thoroughness of the documentation and the exemplary manner in which you have conducted yourself. With a brief nod, she rapped her gavel. Court is adjourned. A tense moment passed before the murmur of departing litigants and attorneys filled the room. Adrian gathered his folders, Samuel whispering next steps in his ear. As they stood, Adrian looked back at Serena. Her posture was slumped, shoulders drawn inward. He felt neither joy nor malice, only the serene certainty that justice at last had been served. Autumn light bathed Ravenwood in a warm amber glow as Adrian stepped onto the balcony of his new downtown condominium. The city skyline, once a backdrop to endless boardroom meetings and silent dinners, now felt like an open invitation to rebuild. The air tasted of crisp leaves and distant wood smoke drifting from neighborhood fireplaces. Below, the river reflected the copper hues of maple trees lining its banks, and cyclists, bundled against the chill, passed on the riverside path. Adrian leaned against the glass and sipped his coffee, savoring the steam's warmth against the morning air. It was 6 months since Judge Langford's orders, 6 months since he'd walked away from the courthouse with dignity intact and assets preserved. He closed his eyes, recalling the whirlwind that followed his last court appearance. Within days of the referral, the district attorney's office convened an informal meeting. Prosecutors, guided by Jack's forensic report and Serena's partial cooperation, assessed felony charges against Oliver Whitaker, multiple counts of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to defraud. Whitaker's pattern, testimonies from 3 previous victims, each echoing identical methods of financial manipulation, proved damning. Serena, by contrast, negotiated a plea deal, misdemeanor fraud in exchange for full cooperation and restitution. She would pay back a portion of the misappropriated funds over 5 years and avoid incarceration. Adrian resisted gloating. He understood the fragility of second chances. After all, his marriage had once embodied trust until it rotted from within. But he also recognized that true justice involved accountability, balanced by mercy. Seeing Serena commit, however reluctantly, to repay what she had taken, felt like a necessary, if bittersweet, reconciliation with the past. When the divorce was finalized, the judge's decree granted Adrian sole ownership of the consolidated financial accounts, retirement funds, investment portfolios, and property deeds, all secured under his LLC, as his preemptive structuring had ensured. The marital home, a stately Victorian in Ravenwood's historic Elmwood district, sold quickly. Adrian used the proceeds to fund his condo purchase and bolster his business reserves. He kept one photograph from the collection he'd inherited, a snapshot of their honeymoon in Verona, Italy, both of them laughing beneath the ancient arches of Piazza dei Signori. He displayed it on a high shelf in his study, a reminder that love, like trust, must be renewed with vigilance. In the months that followed, Adrian threw himself into work with renewed focus. His consulting firm, Meridian Systems, landed 2 major contracts, one with a regional bank upgrading its cybersecurity protocols, another with a healthcare network digitizing patient records. Late nights in the office grew fewer as he mastered delegation, mentoring junior analysts, and cultivating a culture of integrity he had always valued. But it wasn't only professional life that blossomed anew. A few weeks after the divorce decree, Adrian met Maya Chen at a networking event for local tech entrepreneurs. Maya, 38, carried herself with quiet confidence, a fellow consultant running her own boutique firm specializing in data architecture. Their first conversation, a spirited debate about emerging AI privacy standards, flowed effortlessly. Unlike past relationships defined by imbalance, this connection felt built on equals. Over the next 6 weeks, they shared dinners at Ravenwood's riverside bistros, weekend hikes through the Pinecrest foothills, and intensive sessions over coffee discussing project roadmaps. Maya's honesty about her own past, her previous engagement ended amicably after career priorities diverged, mirrored Adrian's newfound candor. They moved at a deliberate pace, each step a conscious choice, rather than a leap of faith. One crisp evening in late November, Maya texted, "Still on for dinner at Cienega, 7 p.m.? Adrian smiled and replied, "Looking forward to it." He changed into a charcoal sweater and jeans, paused to glance at the Verona photograph, and then slipped it behind a stack of business journals before heading out. He realized he kept it not for nostalgia, but as a talisman, a quiet admonition that trust must be earned anew in every relationship. Adrian's condominium overlooked Ravenwood's grid of streets, each lined with sterling brick sidewalks and lantern-lit lampposts. From his balcony, he could see the lab where Meridian Systems developed proprietary monitoring software, the cafe where Maya liked to proofread her proposals, and the river bridge where they strolled on Sunday mornings. This panorama, once a faceless cityscape, had become a mosaic of personal meaning. Yet every so often, Adrian would catch himself replaying moments from the saga. The first time Jack revealed the siphoned withdrawals, the hush of Serena's gasp when confronted with her own forged signature. Judge Langford's measured pronouncement, freezing disputed assets. Those memories no longer burned with bitterness. Instead, they stood as testaments to his adaptability, foresight, and refusal to remain a passive victim. In private moments, early dawn runs along the riverfront path, or late evenings by his fireplace. Adrian reflected on how crisis had clarified his priorities. He had once defined success by boardroom victories and client rosters. Now, success included emotional resilience, ethical leadership, and healthy relationships. He saved journal entries on his laptop, sketching out a book proposal titled Data and Trust: Lessons from a Financial Betrayal. It would combine technical insights on cybersecurity and fraud detection with personal anecdotes on rebuilding trust. On the first anniversary of the court's final order, Adrian and Maya hosted a small gathering on his balcony. Friends from Meridian Systems and Maya's consultancy sipped mulled wine as the sun dipped below the horizon, gilding the river with streaks of tangerine and rose. Laughter drifted on the crisp evening air. Across the city, lights twinkled, signals of lives intertwining, forging new stories. Adrian raised his glass. To new beginnings, he toasted, glancing at Maya, whose eyes mirrored his gratitude. In that moment, Ravenwood no longer represented chapters of deception and heartbreak. It had become a landscape of renewal, partnership, and the possibility of trust rekindled. He thought back to the photograph tucked away on his shelf. Two young lovers under Verona's arches, smiling at futures imagined. Now, as the chill of November set in, Adrian realized that life's most enduring architecture rested not in marble or columns, but in the ongoing work of building and rebuilding trust with every new dawn.